Avengers Endgame is getting scenes added to it for its big re-release prior to the release of Avengers Doomsday, but what will these scenes be? Hey everybody, Colton here, and I've been telling you guys for more than a year now that I expect Avengers Doomsday to serve and really feel like a direct sequel to Avengers Endgame. And a little while after I said that, the directors, the Russos, came out and said as much. Now, what did I mean when I said direct sequel? And more importantly, what do they mean when they say direct sequel? Well, it means a few things. It means that the events of Endgame will be directly responsible for what we're seeing going into Doomsday. The tampering with time and the multiverse that we saw happen in Endgame, Tony and Steve meddling with things they shouldn't have, such as Steve staying in the past with Peggy, that is going to be the catalyst for the events of the MCU's literal doomsday, the end of their world and the end of every world. It being a direct sequel also means that Doomsday will be a movie that you can watch without having seen anything else since Endgame. Will it be nice and helpful and more enjoyable perhaps if you have seen Loki, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, I could go on? Sure, yes, very helpful, but they're designing Doomsday as a movie that can be watched right after having seen Endgame with no homework needed in between. You'll be able to follow it without having watched the multiverse saga. And the Russos put it like this, quote, "It's critically important to re-release the movie, and in fact, we will be re-releasing the film with footage that is set in the Doomsday story that we have added to Avengers Endgame. It's an opportunity to create a bridge from Endgame to Doomsday in a very unique way, and because the movie was so successful, we have an opportunity to re-release it. You don't always get the chance to re-release because it costs money. So the fact that we can enhance the story of Doomsday by bridging it to Endgame and these characters that we worked with for years that we love so much and continue their story, it's a really unique opportunity. Endgame is a critical companion story and setup for what you're going to watch in December when you see Avengers Doomsday. Serialized storytelling is the goal here. That's the fun. That's the mission alongside making movies that bring people together. I'd argue there are very few movie companies in history that have brought people together the way that Marvel movies have, fostering a sense of community in a theater. The ultimate reward is fostering community at a time where community is in short supply. All right. A lot to unpack there. So the more critical side of me is screaming right now to say something, so I need to say that, and then we can get into the fun of what these new scenes will be. Essentially, what the Russos are saying here is, hey, we've been away since Endgame, and now we're back, and we haven't had much, or really any, no involvement, we promise, with the shitstorm that has been the multiverse saga. So we're here to do the movie we want to do, and that's a direct sequel to our last movie. So since all the movies that came out in between our last movie and this movie haven't done any of the work we wanted them to do to set it up, we're just going to re-release our movie with some new stuff. Now, the more positive side of me knows that while the Russos are very much so making this their own, and honestly doing something that Marvel needs to do, which is make this new Avengers movie more approachable for everyone, and everyone saw Endgame, so this is a great way to do it. But I know that the Russos will of course also be including elements from the multiverse saga and threads of different stories that have been set up. They won't just, ignore them in Doomsday. There's plenty of brand new characters and stories and plot points and multiverse stuff from this saga that will play a huge role in Doomsday. But I think it's becoming very clear that the stars of this film, the stars of Doomsday, they are primarily going to be Chris Evans, Steve Rogers, Chris Hemsworth, Thor, and RDJ's Doctor Doom. But I do think that maybe Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards will also be a little front and center. There's also the X-Men and the Spider-Man that will be there, so that's all good stuff. But yes, I do think that it's looking like, and especially from the trailer description that they, the trailer they played at CinemaCon, Chris Hemsworth, Thor, front and center, narrating, RDJ Doom, front and center, narrating. Who else? Chris Evans, Steve Rogers there for the stinger at the end. So it's very clear that this is like, it almost feels like it's part of the Infinity Saga, like it's the sequel movie to the Infinity Saga. And yes, there's the multiverse saga within there that has come before, but in a lot of ways, they're kind of ignoring it a little bit, right? Not ignoring it, but it's going to be a movie that works despite the multiverse saga maybe not having worked as well as they had hoped. Anyway, so what scene or scenes are we hoping that will be added? What do we think will be added to Endgame? Well, I have a lot in mind. Number one is one that I've talked about for more than a year now. Have the post-credit scene sound that we got in Endgame, because Endgame has no post-credit scene except for this sound of Tony hammering his Iron Man helmet from the first Iron Man movie, and we hear that played over the Marvel Studios logo at the very end of the credits in Endgame. So you could now have that instead have a visual element on top of it, and it's RDJ's Doctor Doom building his armor and hammering on his Doom mask, just like Tony in Iron Man. But I also think that it's important that this scene or scenes that are going to be added be more than just a little tiny tease or post-credit thing. I think it needs to add something to the story, some oomph, a part of the story that we've never seen before. And it's almost like now we're getting to see it from a different angle, like it was always there. Like, have an extra conversation, like at the funeral of Tony and Natasha, where it's Doctor Strange, Hulk, Steve, Thor, Shuri, whoever, discussing the possible ramifications of what they just did, tampering with time. Have Loki show up at Steve's door in his new timeline after he created that splintering timeline when he went to live a life with Peggy, and have Loki let Steve know that Doomsday is coming. And that would be a great way to set up Doomsday. Give us that moment of Tony in the Soul World, which was an actual deleted scene that they filmed for Endgame, but then they cut it where we saw Tony with his daughter all grown up. And maybe instead, in this version of the movie, when he snaps, because we never saw what he saw in the Soul World, I think that's a perfect time to add a scene in, is after he snaps, we get a Soul World scene. So maybe he does see Morgan, but maybe he sees a variant of himself. Because hear me out, I'm not just pulling that out of my ass. Thanos saw Gamora. So yes, it makes sense that Tony saw Morgan, because that's his daughter, Gamora's Thanos' daughter. But Thanos saw Gamora because that's what he lost in order to do what he wanted to do when his Infinity Stone snapped. Gamora is who he lost to achieve his goal. He killed her. So while Tony also lost his daughter to achieve his goal in the sense that he is now dying and won't get to see her grow up, the literal life that was lost to achieve Tony's goal was his life. He sacrificed his own life. So in the Soul World, we could see his variant self from another world. Perhaps his snap sent shockwaves through the multiverse, and that variant self would of course be Doctor Doom, perhaps dreamwalking or something. And look, I'm still 100% convinced that while Dr. Victor Von Doom will very much so be a full-on Dr. Victor Von Doom with no known connection, at least to him, or at least for most of his life he didn't know, no known connection to Tony Stark. But I think we are still going to learn that these two characters, Tony Stark and Doctor Doom, are multiversely connected. Maybe because Tony was adopted and was always a Von Doom, but he was adopted by the Starks for the MCU we know. I like the idea that He Who Remains, when he was running the Sacred Timeline, he deemed Doom a threat, so he killed his parents and had him get adopted by the Starks and become Tony. I think that would be cool. But for any of the many reasons that we've pondered and theorized on, could be the possibility, maybe something we haven't thought of. But I do think that these two characters are going to be connected, and we are going to have a reason that they look alike. I don't believe for a second that Marvel only brought back RDJ to play Doom just because they wanted to have RDJ back and wanted him to play Doom. That's of course a big part of the reason. They thought he would be great for the role, and they also know that, hey, bringing back RDJ is a big deal. But there's also a story reason that these two characters are going to look alike. It likely won't be addressed in Doomsday from what I'm hearing, but I do think I know it will be addressed in Avengers Secret Wars. What is that reason? I do not know. I have my theories, but it damn sure isn't going to be, oh, golly shucks, gee, the multiverse is so infinite that we just happen to look alike. No. So yeah, I'm expecting to see the bulk of the new scenes that are added to Endgame be at the end of the film. But I also think it would be cool if there are some other new scenes littered throughout the entire movie. You could call it Avengers Endgame, the Doomsday cut. And it's a version of the film where we see things that were hiding in the first time around, or like you present it as they were hiding, or we just, the camera was at a different angle and we didn't quite see it. I think that would be cool. Now, I don't think that we're going to see like 15 minutes of new footage added to the film. Probably more like 5 minutes max. And in all likelihood, it will be scenes at the end of the film, probably starting around Tony's death, his funeral, the time platform where Steve gets on to return the stones and goes to Peggy. That's where the bulk of this new stuff will be. And maybe this new stuff is even in Avengers Doomsday, like actual scenes from Doomsday, like Doomsday's opening moments that perhaps pick up right after the events of Endgame. And maybe we're getting a peek at that by also putting those scenes at the end of Endgame in this Doomsday cut. But hey, those are just my thoughts and theories. I would love to hear yours down in the comments below. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time I upload a new video. I've been Colton Ogburn, and I will see you next time. Bye!